Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Matthew Pogorski, and I am a clinical neuropsychologist at the Child Mind Institute. We are a national nonprofit that supports children and families with gold standard mental health care advice and resources, all online and accessible to everyone. We are here for you wherever you are with expert telehealth resources, including diagnosis and treatment of mental health and learning disorders, which is a little bit of what I do, group programs for anxiety, mood disorders, ADHD, and much more. Remote neuropsychological evaluations, which is also a big part of what I do at the Child Mind Institute. Um, and if you'd like to learn more about the different telehealth services that we offer, you can visit childmind.org/telehealth. Once again, childmind.org/telehealth to learn more. So, with protests over the violent deaths of Black Americans dominating the news, it's understandable that many kids are feeling scared, confused, or angry about the current situation. We are all thinking about racism and violence and how to raise caring children and talk to them about what's happening in our society. We are happy to try to answer all your questions about whatever parenting challenges you have and the anxieties that you are facing yourselves. So today I'd like to talk about working with college, with teenagers about what college looks like in a post/current COVID-19 world. And to answer your questions about that and anything else that you're wondering about. So all you have to do is post your questions in the comment feed. We'll also post some links to some helpful resources from our website, childmind.org. And remember, we're here every day and we look through your questions daily. So please leave your comments in that chat box down below and I'll get to your questions as they start popping up. And again, you can ask questions about our topic today, which is talking to teenagers about college in a COVID world, and or any other topic that you may be wondering about, and that could be neuropsych testing or evaluations, learning disorders, ADHD, anxiety, behavioral disorders, whatever you have questions about, and whatever's going on for you, I'm happy to try and answer the best I can here while I'm with you this afternoon. So there are a couple things I think when it comes to understanding what college may look like in the fall, and it seems like there's sort of a wide array of what it may look like for depending on the university and the college, and even then there's still so much we just don't know yet, because I think colleges are still trying to figure out what is the safest and way to reopen, while also making sure that students are back in school and they can have some sort of meaningful college experience, because obviously doing virtual learning and remote learning is really challenging and frankly is sort of suboptimal in a lot of ways. So, I think a lot of colleges right now are trying to think about the best ways to do this. So what I've found is that, what colleges may look like in the fall is that there are fewer checkpoints at entrances to academic buildings. There may be one-way paths across grassy quads. There may be face masks in classrooms and dining halls. Dorms may be turned into quarantine facilities for any students that are exposed to coronavirus. I know some colleges are rolling out regimens for testing and contact tracing, which can help us to identify those who tested positive and or may have spread it. Some schools are thinking about how to do quarantine and isolation protocols and put those in place. And of course, requiring students to continue to maintain social distancing and wear masks. And even some universities are actually thinking about foregoing fall break and getting students home before Thanksgiving in an attempt to limit the amount of travel to and from schools. And the reason I wanted to bring up all of those different things, what college may look like, is because these things may be helpful for parents to have the knowledge and to also be able to pass on to your children about what that experience may look like. And I think understanding what it may look like in certain schools may actually help reduce some of the anxiety and so of the worry that comes around, well, what is college actually going to look like if I am a student and I am returning? And I think probably a lot of kids and teenagers are wondering what college itself may look like. So knowing that schools are trying to consider some of these different protocols and thinking about how to maintain safety while also trying to ensure somewhat of a college experience for students who are either going to be freshmen or students who are currently there, I think is important just to know. So that's the reason I want to bring up some of those points. I think overall, in terms of speaking to teenagers about the college experience, it's really important, again, to be very clear about the information that you have, but also acknowledge if you don't know or don't have an answer about what college may look like, to share that with your child as well, and to say that you're going to try and connect, you're going to try and continue to gather more information about what that experience may look like, but you may not have all the answers, and you will try and keep your child updated as much as possible as you continue to get more information. So I think that's sort of a big point, an important point to get across, is that you want to be able to, when speaking to your teenager and your child, to be able to let them know that you're gathering information, you're trying to stay on top of it, and you don't want to stoke any additional anxiety or worry. Rather, you want to set the expectations for them so they may have a better idea of what they can expect if they are to go back to school. I think another important point in speaking to teenagers about college is acknowledging that that a lot of people are in the same position right now, and that they're not alone in this. And so everybody's trying to figure out what is the best choice for their family, what is the right thing to do, and that it's not an easy decision, and there's a lot of thought that needs to be put into this. And I think it also really depends on every family, but that they're not alone, that a lot of folks are really trying to think about what's right and what might make sense. And I think that can be encouraging for teenagers to know as well, that they're in the same boat as a lot of other kids across the entire United States and even the world in many different places, about trying to figure out what's the right way and how do we manage going to college, and what college looks like and what that experience is like for students who are currently going to be attending. I think that another thing that could be helpful, just as a general tip in talking to your teenager about the college experience, is to let them know that no matter what, as their parent, you will continue to be there to support them, to continue to listen to them, to hear out their concerns, to be mindful of their anxieties and their fears, and really to not be judgmental about what their anxieties or fears may be, because I think any anxiety or fear that a teenager may have about what college looks like is probably in some ways valid, and I think as a parent you want to just be there and continue to communicate that you're there to support them, you're there to have open conversations and discussions, and you're going to try and be thoughtful about how this is all going to work. One additional thing that I think is actually super important also to keep in mind as a parent is to emphasize as much as possible continuing to have a good structure and routine at home leading up to the college experience, especially for those students who are seniors in high school who just graduated, who are going to be freshmen come this fall in college. You want to be able to set up a summer routine for them that continues to be structured, continues to include things like maintaining a healthy diet, taking a lot of doing a lot of things that can promote their physical health, like exercising and taking walks. You want to obviously, and this is an individual decision for every family, but think about socialization opportunities in a safe and controlled way. And I think the last thing also is, obviously for us especially, considering is super important, is your child's mental health and emotional health. And I think being cognizant of that right now and trying to support their mental and emotional health is super important. College and transition to college can be a really scary time for any family and any student. But especially in this time when anxieties and fears overall are raised and the experience for many is so uncertain, I think we want to be even more cognizant about and more aware and mindful of the different feelings and anxieties that that students may be having. If you're a parent of a student that is not quite ready to transition to college, they may be maybe a sophomore or junior in high school, but are starting to have some worries and some fears about what college may look like for them even, and what the process looks like for them, and you know what they should be thinking about. You know, I think there's still a lot that there's still a lot of unknowns, and there's still a lot that we don't know and how things will continue to develop and look like. But I think as parents, you want to continue to be reassuring. You want to continue to provide as much information as possible, and you really want to be there to have open dialogues in communication with your son or daughter about how you can help them and support them best. So, you know, I think this is something that is not only just a consideration for seniors, but also for other high school students as well, as they begin to think about the college process and maybe start thinking about applications and things like that. So I'm going to take a brief pause to do a reiteration. So my name is Dr. Matthew Pogorski. I'm a clinical neuropsychologist here at the Child Mind Institute. And this afternoon, I am answering your questions about how to speak to your teenager about college and the college experience and what that may look like going forward. And I'm also happy to take any other questions that you may have, and that could be anything from neuropsych testing to your child's education, to academics, to learning, to learning disabilities, to ADHD, to autism, to anxiety, behavioral disorders. So any questions that you have about really anything in general, I'm really happy to get to and happy to answer. And you can actually just leave your comments in the chat screen thing, comment section. Sorry, I lost my words for a second, and I'll try to get to them the best I can. In the meantime, while we're still waiting on some questions to come through, I'm going to take a couple of questions from our mailbag. We continue to get questions in from families all over who are wondering about a lot of different things right now. So I'm going to take a couple of questions from our mailbag from parents and folks who have reached out to us in the interim. So we got a question from one of our viewers who asked the following question. So the question is, my son has ADHD and is talking about taking a gap year since college won't be on campus in the fall. It was such an uphill battle to even get him into college in the first place. On the one hand, we worry that he'll lose momentum, but on the other, we can see why he wants to do it. Any tips for navigating this confusing decision? So that was a question that came through our mailbag. And again, just to reiterate, this is from a viewer who has a son with ADHD, is considering taking a gap year because college is not going to be on campus. And they're wondering about how to keep up the momentum during this time to make sure that their son is still engaged, and they wanted to get some tips on how to navigate this really challenging, confusing time period. So I think for me, you know, one of the things that could be super helpful is actually trying to get a sense of what your son's long-term goals are. If he has any long-term goals or things that he's really interested in the future, and of course, there are a lot of kids and high school students and even college students and adults who aren't really sure what their future looks like and what that may look like. But I think especially for students with ADHD, trying to chart out what their long-term goals may be, and then really creating a step-by-step breakdown of what they need to do to achieve their goals and making it explicit could be really helpful. I think, as I mentioned before, you know, during the summer, it could be challenging perhaps to set up a routine and structure in place. But for kids with ADHD, that becomes even more important. So making sure that there are consistent routines and structures that they continue to adhere to can really enhance and maintain motivation. So I think just making sure that the summertime is as much as possible structured, and that there are those routines could be super helpful. And I think just having those open and collaborative conversations about how he wants to structure his gap year could also be really helpful. So if your son is going to take a gap year and that is a decision that as a family you arrive at, then I think just making sure that there's a very consistent routine, that there's a lot of things set up in place for that gap year could be really helpful, because you don't want to end up in a position where you guys take a gap year and there's just not that routine and structure, and your son may become demoralized or sort of aimless or sort of feeling like down about his experiences. So I think just making sure that there are some really clear things that will be set up during the gap year could be helpful too. So we did get a question. Thank you so much, Gina, for reaching out on our Facebook Live and asking a question for us to answer. So Gina asks, how can I teach my autistic child forgiveness? I think that's a really, really great question, and I'll try my best to answer it. So children with autism spectrum disorders can have some difficulties, certainly with things like picking up on social cues, and really one of the core challenges in autism spectrum disorder is what we call social communication, which is being able to, and that encompasses a broad array of skills, but it really pertains and has to do with being able to communicate effectively in social situations. And that can be everything from expressing emotions and how one feels to asking others about their experiences and how they're feeling. It can also have to do with nonverbal social cues, like being able to read another person's facial expressions, being able to make eye contact, being able to carry a reciprocal back and forth conversation, and being able to do things that may seem sort of automatic or easy for many people, like forgive others or ask for forgiveness or give forgiveness to others. That can be really challenging for individuals some individuals on the autism spectrum, because social communication for them is just a difficult thing for them to manage. So whenever we think about teaching social skills and social communication skills, like teaching forgiveness or asking for forgiveness or obtaining forgiveness, we want to make sure that we're teaching these skills in a very explicit, structured, and systematic way. And that means that we want to make sure that we're being very clear about what the expectations are and what goes into either asking for forgiveness or expressing forgiveness for doing something, maybe like misbehavior. We want to be really explicit about the steps that go into that. We want to be very explicit about what the expectations are for them to do and how they should express themselves if they are asking for forgiveness. We also want to make sure that we're reinforcing their attempts, meaning that if your child, and you see your child asking for forgiveness, for instance, that you are catching them in that moment and saying something like, wow, you did such a great job of asking for forgiveness, or, because you were able to do this, ask for forgiveness, you're going to receive some sort of tangible reward. But it's really important that when teaching any social communication skill, we want to be able to make it very explicit for them. We want to set out the parameters. We want to really give them as much information as possible in a very explicit way. And we want to when we do catch them doing it, when they are doing it, make sure that we're rewarding them in the moment as much as possible, because that's going to actually increase the likelihood that they'll do it again. So we know that reward can be very positive in the sense that it increases the chance that a behavior is going to occur again in the future. So those are sort of guiding principles to think about, not only for teaching forgiveness, but also for really teaching any other social communication skill as well. So I hope I answered your question, Gina, and thank you so much for reaching out to us. So I'm going to get to another question now from Jackson. Thank you so much, Jackson, for reaching out to us on our Facebook Live this afternoon. So Jackson, I'm going to read your question out loud. So Jackson asks, we're in the UK, and I have a son with high-functioning autism. Since lockdown, his behavior has gone from bad to worse. He's also suffering from anxiety. It's impossible to get him to do schoolwork. How do I help motivate him? Yeah, that's a great question, Jackson. And I think, what we're seeing and what I'm seeing personally in the families that I'm working with is this is something that is not uncommon right now. My feeling is that a lot of children and families who may have had some of these challenges beforehand, what's happened since the lockdown is in place and folks are confined to their home and there's not a lot of opportunities to get out of the house, or in school and virtual learning is a very new experience for a lot of children and families, and that comes with its own challenges, is that kids that may have had some behavior challenges beforehand or emotional challenges beforehand, we see that these things have become exacerbated with the lockdowns that are in place. And it's raised anxiety for some kids as well. I know that some of the children I work with are more anxious now, especially like some of them are anxious about getting out of the house, leaving the house because of everything going on. But it's also hard for them to stay cooped up. And what's happened is it can also lead to some task-avoidant behaviors that may have been challenging to get them to engage in before, but now it's become even worse. So I guess my feeling is, first, what I'll say to you, Jackson, is you're not alone in this, and I've seen it with a number of families that I work with. In terms of how to help motivate him, I think that in families where we have seen that these challenges for children who have some sort of learning or mental health challenges is making sure that they are continuing to get mental health support during this time. And I think that's actually a really crucial thing. When we see also that some behaviors have gone from bad to worse, as you put it, we really want to make sure that families are getting mental health support to really be able to deal with these challenging behaviors and emotional aspects that are coming along with it. So if you don't already have a therapist or mental health support in place, that's actually something I would really encourage for you and your family, and especially because it really can take such a toll on caregivers when children are exhibiting these behaviors and their kids are suffering. It can take a really big toll on families and parents, and we know that. So I think having mental health support for your child and thinking about different ways that you can help motivate him and deal with the anxiety. And there are a number of psychologists and mental health professionals out there who are really specialized for working with children and families who are dealing with autism spectrum disorders. I know our clinic, Child Mind Institute, has folks that specialize in this work, and this is something we often work with. I think having the support for your child is important. I think as much as possible, if you're able to, trying to get some support for yourselves, because we know that in order to be effective caregivers for our children, as parents, we need to make sure that we're getting the emotional support to manage our reactions to things, because kids are really going to pick up on our behaviors and our emotions. So if, as adults, we're appearing very frustrated or angry, which is perfectly normal. It's not to say you shouldn't feel that way, and obviously these things are so frustrating and hard to deal with. But I do think that getting your own emotional support, if possible, can really be beneficial, because this is just a really challenging time for a lot of families, and it's just really important to make sure that children and families are getting the support they need. A few simple tips and things that you could think of in the interim to get some motivation in place is really to set up very consistent expectations, making sure there are a lot of routines in place, making sure there's reinforcement systems in place, making sure that your son knows exactly what the expectations are of the day, printing out a visual schedule can be really helpful so that they can see exactly what is expected of them. Trying to scaffold schoolwork or academic tasks that may be challenging can be helpful. Teaching skills for emotion regulation, self-regulation, and coping, things like diaphragmatic breathing, mindfulness can be really helpful. So there's a lot of different tips and tools that are out there. I would also definitely recommend visiting our website for additional resources, childmind.org. We have a lot of resources on how to manage anxiety and behavioral difficulties. And in fact, I think one of our presenters tomorrow, who's going to be on Facebook, Dr. Vibert, who's specializes in autism spectrum disorders, she's going to be doing one of these Facebook Lives tomorrow. So that she may be a nice additional resource as well. I think there's a couple of those things that can be helpful, but I think working with a mental health specialist can also be great because you can also individualize these things for your son, and also think about how to maintain that consistency in those routines. And so it doesn't all fall on you as parents, because that can just be really hard. And I think that, we want to be able to support parents as they go through these challenges now as well. So I can't believe it, but we're nearly out of time. I want to thank everybody who has tuned in this afternoon to listen and for asking your questions. I feel like I didn't even get to some of our other questions about college and what that experience would look like. But if you are interested in learning more, please don't hesitate to reach out. You can leave your comments in the chat, or continue to check back on our Facebook Live page for other speakers who are going to be presenting, or visiting our website, childmind.org, to get some additional resources to find out how you can speak to your children and teenagers about everything going on right now. So I want to thank you all again for joining me. I hope this was helpful. Remember, we're here for you every day to support you in this extraordinary time. The Child Mind Institute is here to help with the mental health and parenting needs of this coronavirus crisis, no matter where you are. We are borderless right now. Please visit childmind.org/telehealth to learn more about the incredible variety of telehealth resources we have remotely and available during this time for children, teens, and young adults. Be safe. Thank you so much. And I look forward to continuing to help all the families out there.